And let's get this show on the road. All right, and good evening, everybody out there. Those of you who are watching this on the 8th of March, International Women's Day, welcome to The Challengers. It's brought to you by the Embassy of the Netherlands in Sri Lanka and The Talk Show. My name is Shanuki Dialvis. I'm the host and creator of The Talk Show. It's an online community talk show on YouTube, and we've had a little luck in having quite a few voices coming out and sharing their truths. We try to be an alternative voice for social justice. We try to let the general public come out and share their truths about topics that we find uncomfortable. A lot of them predominantly issues and struggles by women in Sri Lanka. And this is a really important event for us because whilst, especially on International Women's Day, there's a lot of talk that happens. And a lot of the time, including on the show, we talk about the issues, we talk about the problems. But there's a lot of talking, and then the question remains, where's the doing? So what are the solutions? Who's doing something about it out there? And really, I found that in talking to a lot of people from around Sri Lanka, lots of women who go through struggles, there really isn't a large acknowledgement of the amount of work being done on these issues and being done by organizations out there. Who are the organizations in Sri Lanka who are working on various areas of gender issues, and who can we reach out to for answers as public? So today is very special because we have who we call the challengers, who I acknowledge as the challengers. We have people, individuals in the room on this session who represent various different organizations working in the field of gender justice, women's issues in Sri Lanka. And this is a chance for you out there who are watching this to get to know each of those organizations, what they do, which area they specialize in. We also are very privileged to have two lady politicians, because often you find the civil organizations versus the government or versus politics. And here we have them coming together. We have Dr. Hagni Amarasuriya and Lihini Fernando, who will be here to represent female representation in parliament and politics, who will also speak. We also have an up-and-coming politician, Rai Balthazar, who is also here. So I'm hoping that we have a really, really good exchange of learning. And I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody has to contribute. To those of you who are watching this from home, we will have this session, we'll have the subtitles in Sinhala and Tamil for you to watch it, as well as each of these organizations, their websites and their contact numbers will be signposted on the comment section of the video that you're watching. So you can reach out to them if you do want to engage with them in the future. I'm now going to just allow the co-host of this session to take the stage. I'm going to invite Madam Tanya Gondrip, who is the ambassador to the Netherlands, who will speak on what the challenges is all about. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Shanuki, and there the madam was again. Thank you for this this nice introduction, and let me say a few words. This is an event in the Speak Up series, as we call it at our embassy. When I came to Sri Lanka, I met, and I still meet, a lot of very strong and outspoken women, and I felt that I could contribute in one small way, and that is every now and then making sure that these women have a platform to actually be able to speak up and to be heard. And last year, during, not even on, but around International Women's Day, we did that literally. We had a stage and we had guests. We spoke about difficult subjects and taboos like abortion. It was a very intimate session. And this time we have to do it online. Maybe I can ask the other participants to mute the session because I hear some background. Thank you. So last year we got together. This year, unfortunately, we cannot do that. But we meet online, and thanks to Shanuki and her team, we have this meeting together with you, and I'm very happy to see you all. I feel sometimes that I know many of you because I also follow a lot of you on Twitter. I know that it's not the social media channel today. Everybody's telling me I should go on Instagram, but I'm still an old-fashioned Twitter person. But I'm happy that I meet some of you there. So I have been following you, and I know that you're doing great work. So this meeting is indeed aiming at raising awareness about you, about your strength, about your work, about your existence as women, as organizations that are actually challenging the status quo in order to improve the lives of women on a daily basis. And that's a huge task. And that's why we call you the challengers. And a big advantage of doing this online is that we can have people from the Netherlands, ladies in this case from the Netherlands, joining us. Both Pascal and Laila are here, and they will introduce themselves later, but I'm very happy they're here to also exchange experiences from the Netherlands, because the Netherlands maybe has gone through some stages or phases that Sri Lanka is still going through or is still in. And it is and could be interesting to share our experience. But really, there is no place or room for complacency here from our side, from the Netherlands, because we have still a lot of issues to deal with ourselves if you look at gender equality and women's rights. And for instance, just to mention one, we've never had a female prime minister. And last week, there was an article published. We have elections coming up on the 17th of March. An article was published about how female politicians encounter a lot of hatred in media, but especially on social media in the Netherlands. And this was the first time that actually journalists looked into this, that indeed they do meet more hatred than men. And more than men, they are criticized not because of their political viewpoints, but because of the way they look, their body, the color of their skin, their religion, or even their voice. So it is really sad to read that is still happening. So as I said, enough to actually also work on from our side. So let's go ahead. I would like to thank everybody for joining this session. And I'm very much looking forward to this, and let's hope that this session will be again a small step and a small contribution to a more inclusive and more equal society, or let's say to more inclusive and equal societies, both in the Netherlands and in Sri Lanka. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Tanya, Madam Conway, Madam Ambassador. I don't know. These are very awkward conversations. I'm horrible at this.
Tanya is good.
Tanya. I'm not used to that, but thank you so much for that welcome. I'd like to now sort of extend an invitation to each participant in this room to tell us a little bit about what you do, so that those who are watching are aware, and those of you who are here also do know it. I know a lot of the Sri Lankans know each other because it is a circle of defenders who work closely with each other and who have. So maybe we can start off with Laila, who is in the room. And Laila, if you could just tell us about your organization and what you do in the Netherlands.
Yes, thank you. And also for me, let me first start to thank Tanya for the invitation, and Shanuki for organizing. Looking forward to this event and conversation. I am the director of Women Equals Men, Dutch gender platform, the largest platform in the Netherlands working on women's rights and gender equality. and we specifically focus on the Dutch foreign policy. But as Tanya said, also in the Netherlands, we still have a lot of work to do. So to uphold our credibility on the international stage when we focus on, when we champion women's rights and gender equality in the UN Council, Human Rights Council, within the European Union, then we still have a lot of work to do ourselves. So that is also what we do the last couple of years, to work closely with women's rights organizations that focus on the Netherlands and the Dutch policy. We represent predominantly INGOs, women rights organizations in the Netherlands with programs and focus internationally. So let me just leave it there.
Thank you very much for that. I'm just going to go in no random order, just according to the screen that I see here, so that I think we're all in an inclusive, equal space. Can I extend an invitation to Marini de Oliveira to please tell us about what she does? I think she's someone who has done quite a lot and is looked up to quite a lot by other gender champions in Sri Lanka. Marini?
Thank you, Shanuki. I would like to begin by thanking the Ambassador of Netherlands and the other participants for having me here. I'm Marini de Oliveira, an attorney at law and the former chairperson of the National Child Protection Authority of Sri Lanka. And I'm the founder chairperson of Sisters at Law, which is a pro bono women and children's organization. We appear in court, right from magistrates court to fundamental rights cases in the Supreme Court on behalf of women and children who are victims of violence. And also we maintain 2 shelters in around Colombo, and we hope to open one down south in the near future for teenage unwed mothers. If I have time, I wish to expand on what I have just said. And we also create awareness and legal literacy at grassroots level and through very innovative ways among grassroots communities.
Thank you. Marini, if I could ask you just very briefly, before we move on, if you could just very briefly sum up, what is the key challenge that you face as a legal aid provider in gender justice? What is one of the biggest problems we have in Sri Lanka right now, the way you say it?
I'm very happy, Shanuki, that you posed that question. There are 2 very huge, formidable challenges. One is lack of funds. So I'm unable to attract staff. I work a lot with volunteers, but I'm unable to retain them because they find better jobs. Once they get training with me, they find very lucrative jobs and they leave me. So it's a one-woman show most of the time, and it's very difficult for me to handle all the work that I have. I always have my hands full. Even while I'm talking to you now, there's a child in need of a protection order. So while I'm communicating with a lawyer to run to court on Monday morning, I'm just at this Zoom meeting. So it's almost impossible for one person or 2 to run this kind of huge organization where we have spread tentacles to the entire island. We get requests from Mana, from down south, from very rural villages. So traveling is a problem. Then the second one is bureaucracy. We find it very difficult to network, even to get an appointment to speak to someone at a government institution. They don't want to see us. They label us as NGO people and that we are some horrible, enemies. Whereas to make human rights of women a reality, we have to network. We have to build bridges. with the government entities and civil society organizations and government entities have to work together. So that is a huge challenge. So these two are the unsurmountable, formidable challenges that I see right now, although there are lots of other problems.
Thank you very much, Marini. And I think those challenges are some things that are shared by a lot of people. Can I move to Hans Bilimoria, who is in the room right now, to tell us a bit about his organization? Hans, I think you're on mute. That's
hello,
the
can
key
you hear me
phrase
now?
for 2020. Yes.
Yeah, okay. Hello, good evening. I'm Hans. I'm with the Grassrooted Trust. And the Grassrooted Trust works broadly with marginalized groups. So we work with sex workers, we work with the trans community, we work with people living with HIV, and we work with people of diverse sexual orientation. We work with survivors of gender-based violence, intimate partner violence, cyber exploitation. So as part of this, we also work necessarily with, let's say, the Women and Children's Bureau of Sri Lanka Police. We work quite closely with them. We work closely with the CID Cybercrime Division. Since last year, we've kind of moved our base of operations to Ibagamo, which is in the Kurunegala district, north of Kurunegala on the Dambulla Road. And what we're doing here is we run a shelter and a women's center in partnership with a local organization here called Kanta Sangvardhana Padanama, or Women's Development Foundation. And again, here what we do is we support survivors of violence. So we handle cases like, unfortunately, let's say gang rape of 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, so difficult cases. And we also run sort of education initiatives. And one of our key education initiatives is online information through our bakamuno.lk portal, which is trilingual and it has information in Sinhala, Tamil, and English on issues around gender and issues around violence prevention. So it's a small team. It's about a team of 6 people, and working with partner agencies like Child Protection Force, for example, who come and help us, much like what Mrs. De Levera said she does. Child Protection Force comes and helps us with cases, fighting, going to magistrate court, opposing bail, for example, which is very important because then the perpetrators, we do our best to keep them in jail as far as possible, and things like that. So that, I mean, it's a wide range of things that we do. Yeah, in a nutshell.
Thank you, Hans. Just moving into somebody who is trying to influence policy or working more politically connected, can I ask Lihini to tell us a little bit about her work in the gender space, how she represents?
Hi, I'm Lihini Fernando, attorney at law by profession, and I'm also a local councillor representing the Moratuwa Municipal Council. So I entered into politics in the year 2018 when they brought in the women representation quota, where women were given the opportunity to enter into politics. They brought in the 25% quota. So with that, I've always been a person who is passionate for change and who's spoken of social injustice. So I thought that politics is the place. If you want to really make a change, you have to be in places where you can influence policy making. So on that basis, I entered politics. But however, local government politics is quite different to what you see at the parliamentary level. It's actually, it's not an environment where there is meritocracy, where there's educated people, or, you know, where there's like-minded people. So in my council, probably I'm the only one who has a proper occupation, whereas the rest of the people are just councillors and having their own, jobs. And you know, the local council system is quite a corrupt environment. So in that environment, I, being a woman, being very outspoken and talking of the right thing has been quite challenging. But nevertheless, what I've done is I don't expect the system to facilitate, but I try to find a space where we can make change. So I have worked a lot with grassroots level women and also women in my area and children, but mostly try to bring in policies but at the local council level, it has not been very successful. So after 2 years of fighting, we finally managed to get a women's committee. We have this standing committees. So finally, we managed to get a women's committee formed. So even in the local councils, there are daycare centers, there are preschools, but these facilities are not managed, and they don't even have the necessary funding, and more or less they don't have the political will. They don't see these things as very important aspects. So though there are many women councillors around the country, whatever they can do is limited. So in this limited space, I really try to voice out, fight out, but I would say the system doesn't facilitate this. And though they brought the 25% quota, probably with the next election coming in, they might reverse it back, because they don't see that women being the change. So I'm determined to speak I'm determined to work towards getting this 25% quota to the provincial council as well as the parliamentary level in order to increase women's representation in politics. Because if you take Sri Lanka, the population is about 52% when it comes to women, and voters it's about 56%. But political representation in parliament is about 5%, and local council is about 23%, and provincial is about 1%. So we have a very, very low representation when it comes to women. And also they don't see women's issues as these issues as things that needs addressing. They think, development is all about infrastructural development. They don't see social capital development. They don't see the well-being of a family. They don't see women's rights talked about, and bringing things like domestic violence, things talking about those things. They don't see them as important, even to renovate daycare facilities or proper regulations to manage preschools. They don't see these things as important. So there, I think if you take it in the political arena, there's a lot of we need to talk about these things and build social awareness. I think awareness is very important. So that's what I mainly try to do in my space. Have been successful, have not been successful, but nevertheless won't give up.
Don't give up. Don't ever give up. The rest of us count on people like you, the challengers in this room, to please not give up on our behalf. I'd like to now move into, there's an organization in this room that I think has, I would say, a greater amount of awareness amongst the general public than most, which is Women in Need. We have Mariam Wadood from Women in Need. Could you please tell us about what Women in Need is and what you do here in this space?
Shanukhi, and thank you, Tanya, for arranging this opportunity for us. So Shanukhi, Women in Need has been in existence for the last 33 years, I think. And we started as a very small organization who helped victims of domestic violence only. But now we've expanded and broadened our scope to all forms of violence against women, gender-based violence. And also in the last few years, we've worked with Hans and the Grassroots Trust and the police and policymakers on issues of cyber harassment as well. So we've expanded to the cyber space as well. So through WIN, I think WIN is one of the only organizations that provides this multidimensional approach to assisting a victim of violence. We provide psychological counseling to all clients who come in. We provide legal counseling, court representation, and then we also have the emergency shelters. We have 4 shelters at the moment. We're located in 6 districts, and we're hoping to expand as much as possible, because we have seen that this is one of the most important services, especially the shelter service. And shelter service together with all the other services, because from the time the client walks in to our office, she's taken complete care of. So today, actually, we did a small recording of clients and their stories for Women's Day, and we're touched by how they have overcome. They said, it is at WIN that I felt love. I felt safe, because they've been beaten, battered, cut, burnt. Now, I think I told Hans about this client who came into WIN a few months ago. Her husband was a drug addict. I think he uses ice. And her body had burns all over her. And the husband apparently uses ice. You have to heat glass for it. So he heats the glass and burnt her, tortured her for 3 days, sexually abused her for 3 days, tied her up in a room, and she had 3 children. The last child, I think, needed psychological assistance, and she couldn't take him for his clinic date or whatever on time, but she ran away. She ran away from home, from Kolonnawa, and she came barefoot to win. And she collapsed. And she said she hadn't eaten in 3 days. She hadn't had a cup of tea in 3 days. So from the time she came in to win, the counselors and the lawyers have been with her throughout. Then she's taken to the hospital. She's taken to the police, you know, and also you're not sent alone. You're always accompanied. We always send either a counselor or our matron is always with her, right? So that is a great service I think WIN provides for women and girls, and all these services are provided free of charge. So apart from the emergency services that we do provide, we also work on awareness, on creating widespread awareness on SGBV, on gender. You know, we work with men and boys, we work with lawmakers, policymakers, we work with the police. So we try to do a little bit of everything, because something that we have learned is it has to be a collective approach. You can't just focus on one area to make a change. Biases play a huge role, and I think why we're dealing with all these issues is because of the biases that we have been fed in, and we still keep feeding the next generations, all these biases and the discrimination. So a collective effort and a lot of effort goes in to providing a woman with these services that she needs. And also we deal with strengthening the laws, the domestic violence. We go to court on domestic violence for the protection orders, also for maintenance and sometimes divorce. So we do all this through WIN's regional centers.
Thank you, Mariam. Thank you very much. I'd like to now extend an invitation to one of the younger civil support organizations, women just being there for other women, the Sisterhood Initiative. We have Pumi from the Sisterhood Initiative. If you could just tell us a little bit about what you do.
Hello, everyone. My name is Pumi Vattaheva, like Shanuki said. Am I audible, first of all? Okay, awesome. So I am the advocacy lead, and today I'm representing the Sisterhood Initiative. We are an organization that's primarily focused on empowering young Muslim women. We focus on creating spaces for young Muslim women to come in, have conversations about issues that affect them. We are quite a young organization. We just hit our 1-year anniversary in January, but during the course of that 1 year, we have been able to achieve quite a lot. Even though the pandemic hit, we've been able to engage in conversations online, focusing on topics such as the Muslim Marriage and Divorce Act. We've even had conversations about women in politics, and we've created a platform where young Muslim women can come in solidarity and support each other in times of uncertainty, especially during the forced cremations. We were able to engage with the young Muslim women and stand in solidarity during that time. So even though we are quite a young organization and we have Muslim women in the forefront, we do have non-Muslims such as myself as well coming in and heading operations. We are so honored to be a part of this conversation and to be in the midst of such change makers and women leaders and the challengers, as Shanti said. So we are very grateful for this opportunity. Thank you so much.
And we're very grateful that you chose to join us. Thank you so much. I'd like to now give the space over to an organization. It's not always every single women's issue that we take care of. That there are organizations that sort of specialize in some very, very real needs, which one being period poverty and menstruation issues that women face. So we have a representative from the ARCA initiative here. Taraki, would you like to tell us a little bit about what ARCA does?
Yes. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Your Excellency, and the team for inviting us to this conversation. My name is Taraki Pahaksubura, and I'm the head of research for the ARCA initiative. So the ARCA initiative is a grassroots organization that tackles issues surrounding sexual and reproductive health in Sri Lanka in a very tangible and holistic manner. So we have three main programs. The first is sex education for school children. The second is ARCA circle events, which are open to the public and tackle a range of topics from medical, psychological, and as well as social and gendered topics pertaining to sexual and reproductive health, in the attempt of pushing back against the stigma, the taboo, the myth, and the shame surrounding this area of conversation. And to this date, our most ambitious project has been the Sustainable Sanitation Project that Shanuki mentioned, which was created to tackle period poverty head-on and provide women with long-term solutions to menstruate with dignity and also have access to menstrual health management systems and education. So this is an island-wide program that spans across many socioeconomic statuses as well as as well as social classes, because we firmly believe that accessibility should not be a privilege, and therefore all programs are headed with or rooted in respect and accessibility and as well as sensitivity and inclusivity. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. There's also an organization here that, I mean, sometimes there are the doers and then there are the talkers and then there are the storytellers. And there is an organization here that gives dignity to the stories and creates awareness about the stories of our sisters out there. Every Story, we have Ruani De Silva from Every Story here. And if you could just tell us, Every Story is fairly new, I think, in Sri Lanka. Ruani, can you just take us through what you do?
Of course. Firstly, thank you very much for having me, Madam Ambassador, as well as Shanuki and the whole team for having me here. Firstly, I'm very new to this gender space. I actually worked in corporate for 10 years and then just joined Every Story. And just to start off with, so we, as Shanuki mentioned, is a storytelling collective. We specialize in putting out the stories of resistance of women. Maybe they might be stories of how they lived silently in resistance, or their loud, proud stories. So one of the main things that we do is right now we're working on stories of Sri Lankan women who have made changes in different industries, in different parts of life, and who have made it possible and made it more easier for the upcoming generations to do better in these fields. So, and we also like to consider ourselves as a safe space for women and girls to learn from. So we have trilingual workshops, we have learning circles, we have conversations around a different variety of topics, starting from early childhood education to intimacy to basically any of the topics that we believe needs to be spoken of. As Radhika said, we are fairly new, and we, as a collective, we strongly believe in having a South Asian or even a Sri Lankan feminist approach, because even if you look at most of the things or most of the documents or most of the policies, it's very Western and it's very like, you know, the relatability might be very low. Because as an example, if we talk about violence against women, mostly the things that are spoken of is, okay, domestic violence and then violence in public spaces and things like that. But there are problems that are very South Asian, very Sri Lankan, if you may, like, you know, people setting themselves on fire in estates, as an example, child marriage or underage marriage or forced marriage. So we also want to bring to light these different forms or different varieties of feminism or feminist issues that exist in this part of the world. And that is something we are again working on. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for that. One of the biggest, I think, the biggest questions that a lot of women have in this country, especially when it comes to issues like domestic violence, is when they need to escape, where can they go? And I think the knowledge about shelters, whilst we do have shelters, and Hans and Mariam have also spoken of them, it's the awareness of these shelters is very low. So one such organization that is providing shelter is the Sambol Foundation. Inoka from the Sambol Foundation is here with us. Inoka, can you tell us a little bit about it, please?
Thank you, Shanaki, and thank you, Tanja, for this platform, for joining us this platform. My name is Inoka Gamage. I'm the manager of Sambol Foundation, and our founder is Devika Selaman. I must say something about our founder because she was born in Sri Lanka and given for adoption to Switzerland. After studying in Switzerland, married to a citizen, she has come up with an idea to start an organization like this because she is she herself is a product of this gender-based violence in Sri Lanka, because she wanted to support the women like her biological mother. And then when it comes to our registration, we are registered as a limited liability limited by guarantee company, and we are registered in Switzerland as well. We are mainly funded by Switzerland. This is our main source of funding, and Devika Selaman is the one who raised funds for us. And our shelter, as Marini and all others said, we are operating the shelter, which is in Mathara. We have started very recently, although the fact is like that, we had within very short period of time, like 6 months, but we managed to cater about 60 or 70 number of women and children all in the country, because we have a very good network like Women in Need in Mathara, Miss Dhammika and the Sisters at Law, Child Protection Force, and Emerge Global. These organizations have referred us as victims. They have referred many victims to us. That's why we could cater a lot of victims, although we are very recently started. Then apart from that, we provide medical services and counseling services, all of the victims in the shelter, as well as the legal consultation services also we are provided with the whole help of these. We have a group of lawyers like Marini, the Sisters at Law, and Child Protection Force. Miss Milan Salpitkara is in our board. Therefore, legal services also we are providing without any problem. And the other important thing, we in our shelter, counseling services and the yoga practices, handcrafting, swimming lessons. Also, we are providing. We have a volunteers, 2 or 3 volunteers. We have they come into our shelter and do these lessons for them. And last but not least, I think at the moment we are at the final stage of acquisition of land. It's a quite big land. We try to build a big shelter and a workshop, because I believe financial independence is very vital when it's come to women empowerment. Therefore, we all try, we and my madam, and we all try to have to get an employment opportunity, some earning when they check out from the shelter. Because I think the financial dependency on women, depending on men, it's a major case in Sri Lanka. That's all. We'll see.
Thank you. Thank you, Enoka, for doing the work that you do. Another side of women's issues that we rarely talk about is women with disability and the justice that they deserve. We have Crystal Reed from Enable Lanka Foundation. Crystal, can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do with for women with disability?
Thank you, Shanuki. I'm audible, I'm assuming?
Yes, you are.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Shanuki, and also Ambassador, for this amazing opportunity, because most of the times when we talk about women, we kind of tend to miss out on women with disabilities. And this is, so I'm extremely glad for this opportunity. So for those who need image description, I'm a South Asian woman with short hair, wearing a dark green top. As Shanuki mentioned, we are from Enable Lanka and we work with people with disabilities. We try to reframe the value and the dignity of persons with disabilities in our country. And we also try to make others see that they are not a part of charity or social services, but also citizens, but they are citizens of rights and responsibilities like any other. So working in this sector, two key issues that we've come across, especially with young girls and women with disabilities, one thing is the access to sexual and reproductive health education, because in this case, I would say it's a double down situation for them, because not only sexuality and menstruation tabooed in our society, but also disability. So they become deprived by the society, and they do not understand their rights, their bodily autonomy, their privacy, the consent. So this is very much important that we educate them. And we've tried a few interesting tools, a few ideas to bring this education to them, because the current material that we have aren't accessible. Now, this is the other issue. Most of the material aren't accessible for those who have disabilities. We are now testing out a tool even with the Deaf Women's Association. And we're also looking at making it audio for those who have blind and visual impairments. And the other main concern that we have is, just like Devika mentioned, not having that economic independence, because at the end of the day, we all need money. Without that, it's just a no-go for everyone. So we have also started a few projects targeting entrepreneurs with disabilities, especially women with disabilities. And we work in the Puttalam area, and Puttalam being the reason to go to Puttalam is, it is one of the districts, one of the 3 districts in the country right now that has the highest number of women with disabilities, other 2 being Kandy and Trinco. So the first phase is completed, but of course with the pandemic, a lot of things had to be paused, because a lot of work that we do cannot be done online. We have to be there physically. And even speaking of the pandemic, a lot of people did argue on the fact that there are opportunities now that have been opened up for persons with disabilities, like flexible working hours, remote working. But what they also don't understand is these new rules and regulations that came about kind of made barriers and the challenge even more for them. For an example, getting to their day-to-day medical needs. Now, this was the biggest challenge for especially women and girls who had disabilities during the pandemic situation. How do you prioritize them? And another thing is, especially for the deaf community who go by facial expressions and lip reading, because of the mask that they were used, they couldn't even do that. So that was an extreme barrier that they've been having to struggle with. And we are now addressing in our possible ways. And also maybe to give a few challenges when working in this field, I would say one of the biggest things would be the stigma and the taboo that is right there in the country, because of the attitude by even the caretakers and sometimes the guardians, because it's looked at in a very like a karmic situation, or they look at disability in a charity model or in a medical model where they feel the need to cure disability than empower someone who has a disability. So this is one of the biggest challenges that we have. And another being, as I mentioned earlier, other rights-based organizations needs to understand the intersectional philosophy of this, because you cannot talk about women on 8th of March and leave women with disabilities to December 3rd. It has to be in the same platform. Unless we do that, there is no way this movement can succeed or thrive. We need you in order to get this movement forward, and also to make sure that we win the rights of women across the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm going to move to our representative from Yehalia, Tharangi. Tharangi, what exactly is Yehalia and what does Yehalia do?
Hi, Shanaki. Thank you so much for having me and the Helio Foundation. Thank you, Tanya, for organizing this panel discussion. It is absolutely fabulous to be here with so many well-known people, well-known faces. It's such a privilege. So thank you so much. By profession, I'm an attorney at law in Sri Lanka and a barrister at Law of England and Wales. And I practice criminal defense counseling. I'm also practicing in the field of family law and fundamental rights. Other than my practice in law, I am a director of the Helio Foundation, and the Helio Foundation is comprises of female lawyers and law students, and we work in the areas of the legal and policy, the gaps that we see. We speak about the issues that women face, especially when it comes to violence. It's a lot of IPV, gender-based violence. We also work in the area of increasing female political leadership. So we're having outcome document launch on the 13th of March in regards to that. When it comes to about the legal area that we work in, we do get a lot of calls, especially in relation to cyber violence from women and girls who have been harassed online. We then help them through any kind of legal advice that we can give. We go with them to the police when necessary, and then even to court when necessary at that point. So we really like working in this field because like Mrs. Marini said, there are lots of lawyers, but I think there are a lack of lawyers who want to volunteer their time and to do pro bono work. For us, I think the biggest challenge that we have had is a lack of funding, just like Mr. Oliveira said, because while we are capable, obviously, of being able to give our legal advice free of charge, going to the police station, going to courts, etc., when it's sometimes long distance with the court work we have, then it's difficult for us to attend to such purposes. So lack of funding, I would say, is the biggest issue when it comes to us, because we're a very small organization, very recently registered, but we're doing the best we can, and it's great to see so many people also working in our field. I get a lot of help. I have spoken, I think, to Mariam so many times when it comes to this area, because they're obviously more established in this area, and I direct a lot of people to win as well if we are unable to assist them. So yeah, that's about it from me earlier.
Thank you very much, Sarangi. And then we have the hashtag generation working with the youth. Nethmini, would you like to tell us about what hashtag does?
Yes, thank you, Shanaki and the Embassy of the Netherlands for bringing us together. I'm Nethmini Madawala, attorney at law by profession. I am head of programs at Hashtag Generation. So the idea is that we started as a volunteer group back in 2015. So our expertise is in social media. What we do is we use social media to raise awareness on various social issues, and now we have become a full-time organization. So our work is ranging from advocating for youth participation in decision making, getting more women in, to get more women to do more civic and political engagement, advocacy for rights of ethnic, religious, and sexual minorities. And now we are actually focusing a lot more on raising awareness on importance of critical thinking in the digital age, countering misinformation and online hate speech. But when it comes to with a special focus on gender, we analyze social media behavior in relation to cyber sexual harassment of women and gender minorities. And we report it to social media platforms like Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. We use the channels that we have established over time. So what we try to do is we report and we try and get the harmful content down. And I agree with what the ambassador said about how female politicians are targeted heavily on social media, that we also see a lot of gendered hate speech against women. But the problem is we don't see it as much because the number of women in the political sphere is less, so that we just brush it off, but it's not really the case. We see a lot of hatred coming towards women. So with all that work, we also use analysis to do our comms, where we do infographic videos on certain things that we think people should focus on. And we try to reach a lot of youth with different tactic things that we do. And we do a lot of trainings, and we, especially for gender, we get young women to engage in because we can't avoid internet. So how to use internet safely, and we also try to give them redress mechanisms. And we have because a lot of, I think Marini spoke about it, Tharangi, about legal aid. So we have been getting a lot of requests from young women whenever they face this cybersexual harassment. So we thought as a pilot, we'll give it a go, because we have a lot of in-house lawyers. So we thought we'll start a bit of legal aid work to the victims of cyber online sexual harassment. And we are launching it on the 8th, on the Women's Day. So that's that. So that's like this is like a part of the work that we do, because we're not only a gender focused group. With all other work, we also have a focus on gender, and this is pretty much that we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Netmini. And seated next to Netmini in the same room is Rai Baltazar. And Rai is representing the voices of women in politics. When we talk about policies and changing the status quo with the bureaucracy, Rai, what work is being done?
Yeah, thanks, Shanaki, for bringing us together. So I'm representing Women's Voice in Politics. We're basically a platform for women in the political space to come together to discuss politics, policies, government, governance, and we're basically a cross-party space. Our objective is basically to hold the space for women to share their thoughts, to also learn from each other, which we think is very important, especially because there are so few women in the political space also. And also to network with each other and with other resource people, because often within parties or within those political spaces, there's not always a lot of opportunity for women. So we're trying to, it's a kind of an organically built informal forum. It's not a formal forum in that sense. And both our politicians who are here today, both Harini and Lihini, both are part of our space and our group. And really, it's been a very interesting, we are also a young organization. We've been around for just over a year. So we're also very interested in seeing how this pans out, considering that there are people from different political spaces and there's no set kind of agenda except to hold the space for women to come together and to create some solidarity.
Thank you, Rai. And then over in the corner of the same room, we have Harini Amarasuriya, who not only is she a feminist activist, but also an MP. She's in Parliament, as well as she is also representing the Progressive Women's Collective. So that's a lot. So Harini, could you please take us through some of the work that the Progressive Women's Collective is up to?
Okay, thank you, Shanaki, for this opportunity, and thank you, Tanya, for bringing us all together. So yes, I'm a member of Parliament representing the National People's Power, the Jatika Janabala Vegya, which is a coalition of organizations and political parties that sort of are left of center and progressive organization. So the Progressive Women's Collective is one of the partner organizations of the Jatika Janabala Vegya. So the Progressive Women's Collective's main aim is to bring together or provide a platform for women, who take on a sort of identity of feminism as part of their politics, and also while we are not sort of exclusively left-wing, we do tend to have a bit of a socialist feminist perspective within our group. The work that we are really trying to do is to sort of broaden the discussion and the discourse on feminist politics. We would like feminist politics to inform mainstream political narratives and political discourse, so that women's issues are not seen as some sort of side issue that needs to be addressed by the women's wing of the party, or the sort of, dealing only with the issue of women as victims, right? That's important. That work is necessary, but we feel that a feminist perspective and a feminist analysis of the entire political system and the political culture is necessary. And that this discussion also needs to happen and start perhaps within political parties. So one of our aims is actually, as the Progressive Women's Collective, to first influence our own political party, the Jatika Janabala Vegya, to take on board a feminist perspective in their policies, in their discussions, to be more representative of women not only of women, but of a feminist perspective in the politics that we do in terms of our policies and also in terms of our practice. So whether it's being more inclusive, bringing issues of social justice and equality and non-discrimination as the sort of core principles based on which we work. So that's kind of like the mission on which we function right now, and to bring together as many feminist voices as we can to be an to be a stronger voice within the sort of larger national and local political sort of space in a way that we can influence the discourse, and particularly the political culture of this country, which we think is actually quite misogynistic and extremely violent in some ways. And that's what we really want to challenge and to change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you again once more to all the participants from Sri Lanka, as well as for Laila from the Netherlands. And the purpose of this introduction, it may have been long, but it was to make people who are watching this aware of the number of organizations. And this is just a few. There are many, many others, but we didn't have obviously the way to get everybody into one room. But these are a few of the forerunners of people who are working in the gender space, because a big question that we have as civilians is who is out there, who is speaking for us, who is doing something, who can we engage with as civilians. So it was important to show you these are the doers, these are the challengers out there. I would now like to sort of invite our guest speaker, and we're very privileged to have Pascale Groten, who is the ambassador for women's rights and gender equality in the Netherlands, and she represents the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we're so happy to have her. And I think I was quite amazed to know that there is an ambassador for women's rights and gender equality, which is something that we don't have, an ambassador on a national level. Pascale, would you please take us through sort of what is this role that you play, and how has the gender space, how have women's rights evolved in the Netherlands? I think in the last few sort of engagements that I've had with the embassy here, we discovered that there's a lot of similarities, even though we think, okay, that's a European country, this is Sri Lanka, totally two different worlds, but there's so much of similarity in the socio-cultural setup. There's so much of patriarchy that I was made aware of in the Netherlands. So as an ambassador, how have you seen this change? What has worked to change the infrastructures and the systems to actually champion women's rights there?
Well, thank you very much, Shanuki, and thank you to Tanya for inviting both Laila and me to be present in today's panel. I was really impressed with all the speakers, and I wish I was there in Sri Lanka actually to meet you all in person, but this is as good as it gets. Maybe to take you a little bit to the Netherlands and to the developments that have played there. I think 100 years ago, we established voting rights for women. That was called the first feministic wave in the Netherlands. Then we had world wars in Europe. And I think only in the late 1960s, there was the second feminist wave. Many women, also men, went onto the streets within universities. They demonstrated and they pleaded for the abolishment of discrimination between men and women. They demanded for jobs for women. They demanded for childcare. I think Lihini already mentioned how really crucial it is to have childcare. They demanded sexual and reproductive health and rights. They demanded contraception in health insurances, the pill in the health insurance systems, and they pleaded for legal and safe abortion. That was in the late 60s. And then in 1975, the UN called for the first International Year of the Women. And the Dutch, being in a progressive phase in history, decided that they needed to do more. They needed to change the laws. They needed to become a modern country, as one of the former professors said. So laws have been changed. There was a government task force to see, it was called the Task Force on Emancipation for Women. So then you saw that the protests of the late 60s and then the UN year in 75 transformed the Netherlands. It took still quite a while to get contraception into health insurances, to have affordable childcare. It took until 1984 to have free and legal and safe abortion. So it takes time. So from a protest to a law change to a change in the education system, for instance, to change the role models being used in the books that are being used in schools, that are not only boys and men. I mean, we took our time as well. And I think one thing that is really important as well is that I think both Tanya and I grew up with that, is that being a woman, you need to vote for a woman. If there's elections, you always vote for a woman. And as Tanya said, it's quite embarrassing actually that a progressive country like the Netherlands never had a female prime minister. I know that Sri Lanka beat us to that already, I think 40, maybe even 50 years ago, looking back. We've never had a female minister of finance. We never had a female foreign minister. So as Tanya said, I think we're progressive in certain points, and we don't really have taboos that we speak about. I think we're very open in addressing all the taboos that in some other countries are there. Before I took this job, I was the ambassador in Mozambique, and it was actually quite difficult to talk about safe abortion. So in different part of the world, there's different taboos, and I think the Netherlands is able to speak freely about all of them. So at this point of view, I think our parents and grandparents fought really hard for equal rights between men and women. And as the ambassador already said, in certain points, we are definitely there. In many points, we're not there. We still have pay gaps between men and women doing the same job, but the women are always being paid less. We do have childcare facilities, and we do have incentives of the tax authority to reimburse some of the cost of childcare. And I think childcare is now, it was a stigma to send your children off to childcare, because then would you be a good mom? And there's peer pressure. But I think having affordable childcare is crucial for women to achieve. I think one of the participants said economic independence. It's important within a relationship, but also if you don't have a partner, it's really important that you can look after yourself and your family. It's also possible in the Netherlands to work part-time, so to work 4 days a week, to work 3 days a week. And I think especially with young children or with children, or maybe with care tasks for elderly parents, this is something that really accommodates men and women, but mainly women, I can see, to combine work and private life, and to create some sort of balance. So I think that's something that is being fought for as well, and that really helps to get that as well. And then maybe going back a little bit to my role, I've been working with the ministry now for 20 years. When I joined the ministry, I think all our bosses were men. I think most of the ambassadors, I think 90% was men. When my first position abroad was in London, and I had my baby girl, Sophie, who's now 14. And I asked if I could work part-time, and they declined. They said, no, it's not going to happen. I said, but I'm entitled to it because we have laws. And they were just like, no, you're a diplomat, it's not going to happen. It's just to show you that I think the diplomatic service is full of patriarchy, and it's sometimes really slow in picking up on the trends in the society. If I look, I think when I applied to become an ambassador, and maybe Tanya has similar experiences, I hope not, but I was asked, when you become an ambassador, what does your husband think of that? And how are you going to look after your children? So still and it was in 2015. So I mean, we still have glass ceilings to break, and we still have a lot of work to do. But also compared to 20 years ago, we've had 2 female secretary generals. We have 30% now are female ambassadors. So progress is being made, and sometimes you still have old-fashioned patterns, opinions. But I think it's really important that we stick together, just like in this panel, to break those glass ceilings. so the Netherlands has had their own revolution and evolution, and I think every country goes through similar processes within their own context. But for us, it's really, really important to work on economic independence and empowerment of women, to have access to sexual and reproductive health and rights, to have contraceptives, to have sexual education, and to have accessibility to legal and safe abortion, and to strive for gender equality. And I think because in the Netherlands, we feel this is really important for the development, for not only the Netherlands, but also for the development actually in the whole world, and also to achieve the SDGs and to achieve a real development and also an economic growth. This is part of our foreign policy. So gender equality for us is important because women's rights are human rights, but also because if you invest in women, you will achieve sustainable economic growth. If you invest in sexual and reproductive health rights, you invest in the health of women and children, in healthy families. So we have taken gender equality to the core of our foreign policy. It's part of our diplomacy. I think one of the things that I'm working really hard on this moment is the pushback that we've seen. All the language that we agreed upon 25 years ago in Beijing on gender equality and women's rights is being pushed back also by European countries like Poland and Hungary, but also by Russia, by the former president of the US. So we really have to acclaim and take back the language that we already agreed upon 25 years ago. It's the case on gender equality, it's the case on civic space, it's the case for sexual and reproductive health and rights. So we're really working on to push back that pushback. And I think one of the things that we're really working on is also the consequences of the COVID pandemic for women. You still see that, we see in the Netherlands, and I'm sure it's there in other parts of the world as well, that COVID has exacerbated the already existing inequalities for women and girls across the world. So women do a lot of the caretaking, they do a lot of the unpaid work, they have more flexible contracts, so they're the first one to lose their job due to COVID budget cuts, for instance. School closures, the girls drop out. I think one of the speakers talked about child marriages. They're much more vulnerable for child marriages. The health clinics are closed. So I think this COVID actually underlines the efforts that we have to make on working to empower women to take their rights and to work on gender equality. And I already get really passionate about this, but I will be brief because there's so many other things. One of the things I also wanted to stipulate is that we don't do it alone as the Dutch government. We really believe in working together, also with civil society. And I'm so happy that Laila is here. I think I see her a lot in the next few days, and I see her all the time. So just a few things. So we work together with civil society because we believe that also the Dutch government has to be held accountable. We've worked with Laila and her organization on, for instance, the National Action Plan 1325. So to involve civil society into our policy works, I truly believe that it makes our work better. But it's also really good that Laila can check on me if we're doing the right things. Because the paper is really patient and we can speak beautiful languages because that's what diplomats do. But are we doing the right things? And we invest money, a lot of money actually. We support many organizations to hold Tanya accountable for her work in Sri Lanka, to hold me accountable for the work we do internationally. And sometimes that clashes, but it's always with a good cause because we believe that we can have a bigger impact and we can be a better performer on the things that matter to us. So I think that's something that I really want to underline, that we work closely with civic space, even though of civil organizations in civic space, even though sometimes it's It's complicated. And we really believe in also including women and including young people into our policy. So if we go to the Commission on the Status of Women, which is the most important meeting on this topic in New York at the UN, we take a representative from civil society, from a women's organization into the delegation. If we talk about sexual and reproductive health rights, we appoint for a year, funded by us, a youth ambassador who works along with us and has influence on the text we draft, on the resolutions we make, and on the work we do. So I think it's really important not to talk about women, but to involve women. And I think the lady from the organization with the disabilities already said, you can't talk about groups if you don't include them into your policy. So I think that's something that I also would like to give back to you. I can talk for hours, but I think it's...
yeah, unfortunately, we don't have hours and we're already running a little bit over time. But just taking one word that, I took apart was the word pushback. And there's like, now you're pushing back against the pushback. And I think something that we are very familiar with here, and I know the gender champions in this room are familiar, is the pushback from government. I think that's one of the biggest barriers apart from the social mindset change is also the support of the government. So I'm going to put Harini under the pump now because she's the one inside Parliament. And as an activist, as somebody who has been sort of fighting for women's rights, and now you are in the midst of the policymakers and the decision makers, this word bureaucracy, which keeps coming up as, the pushback that gender championing gets. Can you talk us a little bit about what are the greatest challenges that are currently, full disclosure, what's happening in Parliament? Are we, the women, actually a priority? Harini, can I ask you that?
You want the short answer or the long answer?
Well, unfortunately, I want the long answer, but we can only we have time for the short.
Well, the short answer is women are not a priority in Parliament, so I can just stop with that. But let me just expand on that a little bit more. A lot of what Pascal, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but what you said really resonated with me as well, right? And I think with many of us in this conversation today, because in a way, the situation that you described is also what we are experiencing. If you look at the 60s and 70s, that was a time when there was a lot of excitement and a lot of mobilization around getting some of the basics and some of the fundamentals right. So putting in place things like, the maternity leave, healthcare, access to education, all of those sort of core things that we still continue to benefit from. So if you look at some of those, the sort of standard gender indicators like access to education, maternal mortality, all of those infant mortality, we do really well on those, right? But I think two things happened. One was kind of the economic change that took place from 1977 on, where there was sort of this pushback on the social protection stuff, and the dismantling of some of those kind of key, not so much the dismantling as neglect of some of those kind of core areas which for women are extremely important in whether they're in terms of their access to employment, access to education, their safety, their security. So sort of the dismantling and the pushback on the sort of social protection and the social welfare measures that were put in place in the 60s and 70s was I think crucial, is hugely significant in what we are dealing with right now. So many of the structures, many of the systems that were in place that enabled women to do better, to kind of feel more secure, to feel more confident in entering the public space, really got challenged because of this big sort of rollback, or the sort of resistance, or the sort of turnaround from a more sort of social protection kind of model. Then the other thing is, I think also the sort of politically and culturally, we also see a pushback ideologically, right? where there are lots of issues on which, which is unthinkable some time ago, is now not only thinkable, but is happening. Right? The way we talk about women, the kind of violence that we experience. I mean, this is the recent last week, the really horrible events that all of us have been witness to on media. These kinds of things, and the way in which women's issues are talked about, the way in which women are talked about, and the sort of the kind of very the very sort of toxic kind of cultural climate that has developed, in which many of the battles that we thought we had won, like that we would no longer have to keep justifying the need to raise issues that affect women, that we will continue to be accused of going against our culture or importing Western ideas and Western values. These battles our grandmothers and mothers had dealt with, right? And now they're coming back again. They're coming back again, and they're coming back strongly. So you also see the sort of, there's one very interesting phenomenon that I see in Parliament is that when there are issues that really challenge the patriarchal culture and the patriarchal system, all the men, whatever the political background, will come together, right? And I think the classic example is the challenge we've been having with passing the Muslim Marriage and Divorce Act, right? Which the Muslim women have been advocating for years, right? And when that has come into Parliament, it's very interesting the way that opposition and government, the sort of hearing that is given to the men representing the Muslim community, as opposed to the women who've been fighting for this for so many years, is just incredible, right? And you see that male alliance come together so powerfully in instances like that, right? And that's in a way what that alliance is what we lack, right? In places of decision making, not just because we are small in numbers, but also because the women themselves who have got into those positions are very fearful of, I think Lihini would also agree with me, that it's very difficult for a woman in politics to take a feminist position or a feminist perspective or really talk from a women's rights perspective, because you're immediately then seen as a nuisance, right? So, I mean, if you're kind of happy to sort of talk about women from a point of view of victimhood, that's okay, right? That can be dealt with. But the moment you kind of talk about women in terms of rights, women in terms of equality, women in terms of the structural barriers that women as a gender face, and you start talking about gender relations, that makes the sort of the largest, that discomforts everybody, right? So women also then tend to be very careful about how they bring up an issue, how they raise an issue, not to be seen as aggressive, not to be seen as, too sort of authoritative, right? And all of these things about sort of, if I may say, managing the male ego as we sort of raise these issues is something that we kind of have to deal with on a daily basis. So this is where I think the women, now currently we don't have a ministry of for women's affairs, which we've had all these years. It's the first time we don't have a separate ministry, which is in itself is quite revealing, I think. So as a result, we have only a women's caucus. We don't have a women's parliamentary select committee, but we've written to the Speaker asking for a parliamentary select committee, so that hopefully then at least the women in Parliament will have a little more influence rather than simply as a caucus, because the caucus cannot really influence legislature in the same way that a select committee can. So these are the challenges. I think in many ways, Sri Lanka has always been a development anomaly, right? We've managed to have really good social development indicators because of that sort of investment in some of the core areas in the 60s and the 70s. But the real challenge for us now is not only how to sort of prevent the further reversal of those social protection measures, which are so crucial for women, but also to push back on the kind of in the ideological space in terms of just the way we talk about women and the way we talk about women's issues. And also, finally, I mean, I'll just end with that, and maybe that'll be my come in later in on the discussion as well. But this sort of idea that collective organizing, right, collective bargaining, collectively sort of representing ourselves, that's no longer the way in which politics is done. Politics has become very individualistic. Politics has become not about ideology or positions or values. It's become very much about deals and games and how you kind of negotiate with each other in a sort of a very sort of, you know, it's about maintaining power. It's no longer about ideology or a kind of a debate on different political values. And I think that also makes it much more difficult for us to bring in or raise issues that are fundamentally about the way we think about women and the way we think about equality, the way we think about social justice, when ultimately at the end, the decision-making is based on just a numbers game, or who plays the game of politics better and more effectively than rather a debate about ideas.
Thank you. Thanks for Remy for that. I'm just going to pose a question to Lihini also now, because being a woman's voice in politics, and as Harini said, there's not enough representation. The numbers are low. The voice is smaller. But yeah, and we desperately need women to join that voice. But again, the pushback. How difficult is it for a female to come into politics, and what can we do? And I would like to open this actually for suggestions from anyone in the room, really. What can we do to change those social mindsets, that kind of conditioning that makes capable women less afraid to really go in? Now, women like Rai, women like Netmini, they have a larger voice and they're getting into it, but of course, Lihini, you having been in it, you must be more aware of what are the dangers out there, what are the risks, and what is actually preventing our women from going in.
See, I would say it also has to come, there needs to be political will, there needs to be the importance within parties also to give that opportunity to women. I represent from a mainstream political party, and you know we fight there to bring in this 25% quota, and I hope that it will be a reality within, at least within our party. So I think, you know, all parties collectively and all political representatives must understand that, you know, women need to be represented. Women are part of the society, and you know, it's for politics, they are not an outcast. Like, women are represented, women are there in the corporate sector leading and in all sectors, but in politics women representation is very low, because one of the reasons is this is a very male centric environment. For example, if you take politics in Sri Lanka, it is designed in a manner where it fosters and facilitates a man to be in that position, because you know, mostly Sri Lankan politics are not about welfare, not about policy politics, is mainstream politics mainly. It's mainly about welfare politics. It's about being present in the grassroots levels. It's about, you know, being able to go to this funeral and party and all that. So it's all about doing politics. It's not about policy. So even if women come to this this environment, women also have to play the same game. So a woman being a wife, a mother, how can they do this? So does the system facilitate for a woman to play this role while being in politics? So it's a very challenging environment. So one of the reasons I think is we need to advocate for this 25% initially, so that this quota is being brought in and more opportunity are given for women to come into politics. That is one of the key things. I think so it needs to be extended to provincial council and parliament as a start. So when women come into this, I believe that women will work harder, like, you know, they will work and they will build a brand for themselves, so that, you know, going forward, we will have more faces to in politics. So I think that is a starting point. And also I think parties and politicians per se must understand, and that the political will must come from the parties. Then another thing is, I'd like to say that there needs to be regulation, like campaign financing regulations that needs to come in, so that, you know, this political spending is sort of controlled, so that, you know, there's more opportunity for many women and many youth to come. Now this campaign financing regulations, why I say this is, now if you're in a mainstream political party, if you want to run a campaign, say get into parliament, you need an exorbitant amount of money, say close to about 40-50 million to run for an election campaign. So not many can do that. Only people in politics, politicians who have got all this wealth can do it. So even educated ladies, educated youth who want to get into politics don't have this money. So this is one of the reasons why we don't have the right people in politics. The system doesn't facilitate. The system is designed to ensure that corrupt politician is there. And also, if you take from a people's point of view, even people, they also expect a politician to be a particular figure. They don't understand the right, honest people, the importance of right people being in parliament. They don't understand. They want the politician who is there with them, who is present with them, who will come for their funeral and party and all that. So this is the culture. So it's a cultural issue that we need to address here. Also, like if you take women, women also to a larger extent, I would say, are afraid of this political environment, because it is made, politics is considered to be a taboo. It's not a friendly environment. So women must also want to get into this. They must also try to, you know, take up this challenge, because I don't think men will ever create this space for us. We need to go, we need to conquer, we need to penetrate and go there and get into that place, I would say. And also, when women are there, women must create more opportunity for women. Women shouldn't be jealous of women. Women must open doors and welcome more women to come into this. Then together we can lobby, together we can be a team. So those are things. And also another thing is, I'd like to say corporate sector women who have conquered the glass ceiling. Why not take a step and come into politics? I know it might not be easy. It is a challenging environment, but if you have renowned people coming and talking at least about this subject, there will be more awareness. Politics is not a taboo. We need to make politics a profession in this country. Politics is not a profession. Politics is seen to be, you know, done by a certain segment, a certain strata of people in the country. So until and unless we address these issues, at least by talking, at least, you know, with social awareness, we will not be able to change. So personally, I like to say Sri Lankan politics can be changed if there are women, because women are outspoken. Women, I believe, are honest, and they stand up for certain causes, and they will champion certain causes. So we need to get the honest and the right women for this, and women must back women. Organizations also must support. So those are some of the things that I think we need to do. And at least I hope by 2025, we can see more women representation in parliament. And I think collectively, we all need to work to make that happen, because also push for regulation.
Thank you, Lehini. And I'm going to just open it out to everyone, really, because you are activist organizations, you're working as gender champions. And for instance, Mariam, like with Women in Need, you all do have a lot of engagement with government to make certain things happen on a national level, and to get sort of your work with the Sri Lanka police a lot. So what can we do? I mean, even Hans, you do a sort of, I know that you also speak to government a lot and try to change things with the Ministry of Education. You're working on things. So how can, like Pascal pointed out in the Netherlands, where government and civil organizations work hand in hand, how can we as gender champions create that environment when you have this bureaucratic pushback, when you have these barriers? What are there any best practices or learnings in how we can work with government as gender champions?
I'll take this question, Shanuki.
Yes.
So one of the main challenges that I think WIN has faced is, one thing is that we have been around for a long time. We have built a reputation and that trust with people, with governments. You know, we worked in Jaffna even during the LTT, you know, during the incident. So we have built ourselves to a level of national, how do you say, we are identified nationally, we're recognized nationally. But still, when it comes to advocacy, we face a huge challenge in that you work for a period of maybe 4 to 5 years, you know, with a set of people, a group of people, and we come to some kind of understanding. Okay, we're going this direction, we're doing this with the ministries, with the police, to build something, and then they change, you know, with parliament, with the elections, that entire lot changes. And then you're left again right down there. They're not sensitive, they don't think it's important. So we've had that setback, and that is really, really frustrating. So then you have to start all over again, or you think you're not doing this. Because again, you have to start from the sensitizing, you have to tell them how important it is, how much women go through, and it's the same thing all over again. And that puts you off. But well, we still try to keep going. So those are the issues that we face. And I think, Lihini, you brought a very important point about women supporting women. I think with politics, that is very, very important. The fact that, because, I mean, any woman must be scared to jump into that whole political game. It's not even easy for a man, right? Because you're always fighting against someone. You're trying to champion, you know, you're trying whatever way you can put someone down and then forge yourself forward. That's how you go. But when you're a woman, you can't do that. You feel that you can't do that because that's how we are brought up, you know, that socially, culturally, religiously, you know, a woman is made to be someone, you know, who will sit proper, who will talk proper, who won't fight, who won't shout, who won't do something wrong. So we are brought up that way, and then we want to get into politics, and then we don't know how to fight this, right? So I think that is where it's important for other women who are in politics to make sure, or who have been there for some time, to make sure that the newcomers are safe, that they are backed, no matter which political party, right? That they're there to strengthen you, to protect you, even if they need advice, to make sure that they have that fallback, because that is very, very important. That is something even when dealing with women who come in to win, you see that what is most important is for them to have that support, that the fact that you are there, you know, some advice given, some shoulder to cry on, you know, you have that strength and support. So that is, I think, very important. Shanuki, when dealing with governments, like I said, we have that challenge about, you know, when they change, you're back to square one. But at the same time, I think when you keep doing the work that you do, and you keep, you know, where we work at divisional level, at district level, and you prove the work that you do, it's really tough. But over a period of time, with the good work that you do and the bridges that you build, you gain that reputation and the trust. So that is how WIN has, you know, gone forward, because of the hard work and the commitment with which we have worked, and the honesty, obviously. No hidden agendas. We've helped women and girls. And we still do. And, you know, we advocate for equal rights, because as we mentioned here, women's rights are human rights. We're not asking for anything special, anything different. We're just asking to be treated as humans, as equals. And that is our goal.
Thanks,
so,
Mari. Thank you. And just, if anybody here can sort of weigh in, you're most free to, and if you need to ask each other questions, please feel free to put your hands up. We can do that right now. But I'd like to also ask, like, okay, Harini and Lihini, while you belong to different parties, but you're also working together, and how can you sort of foster that culture in politics, where you put aside those party politics and you come together in unity as women, so that even as a coalition, that there is a chance to work together better with activist organizations, with civil service organizations, where it's a collective push for policy change, for legal changes, for instance, like Marini fighting for certain legal gaps to be closed. I mean, is that a possibility? Is it something that there is an experience in the Netherlands? I'd like to ask Pascal, has that sort of thing ever happened where you have sort of women uniting irrespective of whether they belong to government or not and influencing government that way? Is that a way to make this voice more powerful against patriarchy? Or am I just being idealistic?
No, I think you're not actually. Maybe Laila, would you like to take this one?
Yes, please. Because I think it immediately struck me that Harini and Lihini, and I'm sorry if I don't pronounce your names correctly, work together, because in the Netherlands, and as far as we know, it's the only country which has a initiative which transcends political parties. And Women Equals Men is the secretariat of that initiative. It's called the Gender Multi-Party Initiative. And different political parties, from the conservative, from the right wings to the left wing and everything in between, they agreed, like they say, well, we agree that we disagree on many issues when it comes to how the government should work towards social equality, but when it comes to fundamental human rights, and as Mariam also said, women's rights are human rights. We need to stand for this, and twice a year we have an in-depth event with members of parliament. But now we have two co-chairs from the Labour Party, who is in the opposition, and the Liberal Party, who is in the coalition, and a woman. And they stand side by side. They disagree with on a lot of issues. For example, now on the COVID-19 pandemic, and the curfew and everything that relates to that, and much more. But when they talk about women's rights and gender equality, they work side by side and make sure that it remains on the political agenda. They see also a very worrisome trend in Europe on sexual reproductive health rights, and they make sure that they are there to make sure that women's rights and gender equality is not something that belongs to a certain political party, but it is something that for the Netherlands, it should be a core issue.
Okay, Crystal, I believe you had something that you wanted to sort of contribute.
Yes, thank you, Shanaki. I think we were discussing on a few ways that we can actually increase women's participation and bring about and bring down all the discrimination around women when they try to enter into politics. I also think it's important that we have an independent commission for women, because this is something that we even tried to highlight when we submitted reforms to the new constitution that they're working on, because it's important that this happen in a national level to address the discrimination and harassment women across the board, as I mentioned earlier. It could be women in business, women in politics, or it even could be women with disabilities. And this is even in other commissions that are existing right now, maybe to have a threshold defined for having a number of women representation in it, so that they also could address those issues around women in many avenues. And other thing on what Lini highlighted on campaign financing, I mean, this is something that I was kind of wanting to say, because at the end of the day, it all boils down to the amount of money you have in hand, because we work with phenomenal women who have disabilities, who are passionate about getting into more leadership level positions, but it's the money that matters at the end of the day. I'm not entirely sure whether we can get the private sector leadership to come on board and run as the leaders of this country. But what we can think about is pressuring them enough so that they could actually invest on women who are willing to run for these things, because they talk so much about involving women, because they talk so much about, getting women into places. If they are to walk the talk, not just in their companies, because these are also historically, run by men. At the end of the day, it's pretty much the same establishment we're talking about. So maybe we can, look at tapping into the private sector models and see how we can invest more on our women and get them to be represented in our leadership in the country as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Crystal. Is there anyone else who'd like to weigh in on this? Yes, Marini, please.
I would like to bring up the issue of gender focal points in the different ministries and government departments. A few years ago, gender focal points were pointed in all the ministries, all the cabinet ministries and the government departments. But after a year or two, they died a natural death. So it has been there. There's already a structure and mechanism, and those dead structures should be revived so that we can start building bridges now. Ministry of Justice should have a gender focal point. Then Foreign Employment Bureau, Foreign Ministry. Those were best practices which just died away with changing governments. So those should be revived. In the same way, we should have a National Commission on Women. Yeah.
Thank you, Marini. Hans?
Yeah, I'd like to say that I think we also need to take a long view. So I think we need short-term goals and we need long-term goals. And I think one of the long-term goals that we need to really focus on is sort of social emotional learning and education. Because if we take a look at what we're up against, let's try and take a look at what we'll be up against in 20 years or 30 years. So now if you take a look at what I've listened to all day and what we've all listened to all evening today, if women are to equal men, that requires an attitudinal change. And the most effective way to attitudinal change is maybe education. Substantive education reform is essential. And I feel that all of us as a group perhaps need to collaborate in putting pressure on government to really take a look at what we can do in terms of child development, in terms of the different development stages, like what do we teach kids from 3 to 7? What do we teach kids from 7 to 11? What do we teach kids? How do we teach them to respect each other as a human being in terms of looking beyond gender? So I think there are education models in place, and I think we can learn from our friends in the Netherlands also in terms of what education has done in the long term. And I think, so short-term goals, definitely. But what are our long-term goals? Because otherwise we are in danger of perpetuating these challenges, I feel, if we don't look at those substantive education reform possibilities. But then again, that is my view in terms of how we can dismantle this patriarchy. Unless we teach our children to dismantle the patriarchy, unless we teach our children to think differently, I think these patriarchy will be perpetuated. So that focus also, while we look at the immediacy of what needs to be done, how can we look at that in the long term also? That's just something I'd like to throw into the mix.
Okay, thank you. And that's actually, that opens up an interesting question for me. One is to Pascal, is there something that the Netherlands has done to change mindsets, to change the way the patriarchy is explored through education, that have you started changing mindsets amongst the younger generation? And then secondly, I'd like to sort of talk to the hashtag generation representative, to Tharangi from Yehelia, to even the Arca initiative, Every Story. You are kind of very active online, a digital space, which takes a lot less money, I would say, to reach a lot more voices, especially with the youth, and reach a lot more minds to change mindsets. Is there something that has worked for you? You feel that because the digital space has become a very, very influential space for how we view women and how these conversations about women and gender equality happen. And whilst there's a lot of mobbing on the wrong side, there's also a lot of work being done on the right side. So how do you think that this can be explored collectively, how that voice can be expanded? So I'll ask Pascal first. Is there something that's happening in the Netherlands that we can learn from?
I think we had for the last 30 years probably a really active campaign in the schools to get girls into school, into secondary school, into higher education. We also had a really huge campaign of girls because they all chose the higher education or the secondary education. They all chose languages, economy, history, and geography. And there was a really big push for girls to also choose math, science, biology, physics, because you need girls in all the different parts of profession, of course. So I really remember those really active campaigns, and I think we've been really successful in that. What you now can see that girls are overrepresented in higher education. So we have more girls in our universities, in our colleges. We also have more girls entering the foreign service. So we've been really successful in that, and also I think over the broad range of it. My daughter is taking, for instance, math, science, physics, all the things that I didn't want to touch on. But what you do see that I think in primary and secondary school, also teachers are female and male. There's a really good balance. If you look at universities, there's still a huge overrepresentation of male professors. So I think we've made huge impacts since the 80s with active campaigning and money and information going into this field. But we still have to go the last mile.
And how about #generation, Yehalia, even archive, because you're using a lot of online spaces to reach out and sort of change minds about women's issues.
I'll
Yes.
take this.
Okay.
One second, there's an echo coming because we have two levels. Yeah. So two things, right? What we have noticed. Firstly, it's the social media community standards and how the community standards work, because it's very globally placed, and how people view it, how people use the community standards, and how social media, things like Facebook, how they view it, how they analyze content, and how they look at the English, Sinhala and Tamil content. Whenever we report, there's a lot of things that come back to us, say that it doesn't violate community standards, or it's not in line with it, or 100 other things, right? But I think it's a responsibility of these organizations also to hire, they're the big companies, they can also hire people who are savvy in Sinhala and Tamil, and Tamil and English to read the content and get them down, but it's not happening. That's a big problem that we have, and the amount of closed groups that we have when we observe. So a lot of images that were shared with intimate partners are shared it's a massive problem. These groups, we see like 3,000, 4,000 people are joining these public groups, sometimes closed groups, in a span of 5 minutes. So it's that big, right? One group goes down and tomorrow there are 3 similar groups with similar content being shared. So it's a massive problem. And the second thing is how bad the positive content performs on social media. Because what we have noticed is that meme pages, gossip pages, all these major news outlets have their own pages on social media. So those content, satire, and this recent incident of this really unfortunate incident of this murder, how that was sensationalized. But whatever the positive content that comes out, we actually are observing it. It performs terribly, like in the sense that if a positive content gets shared 5 times, we are looking at a gossip page gets shared 500,000 times, right? It's that bad. So we see a lot of positive content being produced by a lot of groups. I think a lot of people in this call also, but the problem is it's not performing well. So that is a major issue that we are saying and seeing, and it's the effect of the echo chamber. So the social media, like you said, it's less costly, but again, if you don't boost or if you're not spending a lot of money on it, the reach is also less. So that's something that I think I wanted to add.
Shanaki, if I can just add to that, I completely agree with Netmini. I think social media has its good and bad, obviously. And the good thing, if at all, in COVID is the fact if we take our project of Devanatharane, which the first phase we were fortunately sponsored and therefore able to have live discussions. But after that, we were not sponsored. So luckily or unluckily, because of the pandemic, we were then able to have Zoom discussions, which meant we were able to have our second and third phase free of charge. And like you said, it has reached much more people than maybe our first phase of youth activists in one room would have reached. Having said that, completely agree with Netmini, especially when it comes to this distribution of nude pictures. It's been a real menace. I mean, and we are also well aware of it. And whenever they've complained to Facebook, either Facebook doesn't have enough providers to take the material down because it's COVID, it's some kind of excuse or the other. And fortunately, I have always referred people to both Mariam and Sharanya at Bakamono because they have a direct contact. And I think if we didn't have this direct contact, honestly, I won't know how to advise anybody because they say they've tried every way they can on their own, but nothing's being done. So I think it's very important to have this contact, that a direct line that we have with Facebook and Instagram. Having said that, like Netmini said, people are just using it for all the wrong reasons, and maybe a video content that we produce with so much difficulty, so much cost, or that will never get shared as much as something else, and we would boost it with the little money we have, or we may not be able to boost it because of the lack of funding, and then the correct content doesn't really get out there, and I don't know what we can really do about it, but yeah, serious problems.
Pumi, you want to weigh in on this?
Yes, so I'll speak on our experience as a sisterhood initiative. Even though we are not an organization that can actually, we are not in a position to actually influence policymakers, but something that we do within our organization is amplify the voices of those who can actually go into influence policymakers. So for example, the sisterhood initiative has been involved with sort of amplifying the voice of MPRAC, which is the Muslim Personal Law Reform Action Group. So we've given them a platform within our own social media platforms to have discussions, to share their posts, to raise awareness on the issues that affect Muslim women. So this is something that I believe we can do to sort of mitigate the issue of lack of reach. And this is something that we can do both on an organization level and also on a personal level. So I just wanted to weigh in on that.
Thank you for that. And Ruini, you have something that you might want to add.
Yes, I just want to basically add on to something that Hans said and bring in social media into that, because we at Restore Sri Lanka we have a young feminist network where we basically because of social media and because of like basically even the pandemic, we got together and we were able to come up with innovative ways to even help these young individuals who are interested, and the group who are interested is actually very huge, to start from things like, how to write a CV, or like how to present yourself at an interview, how you could get into certain spaces. So knowledge and ideas and information on things like that. Social media and everything made it very easy for us to share our knowledge. And also another thing, this the cancel culture of social media, where you get cancelled or when you get called off for something that you might, your opinion that might be questionable. So we have noticed that we want to have conversations with these girls or with these individuals to actually correct them, or to have we as a collective, and 6 of us here truly believe in having these conversations and correcting or like making sure that we tell them why this is problematic, other than just calling out people and canceling them or supporting the cancel culture. So things like that, I think all of us here can work on that and be like, not to call off people and not to be a cancel culture, but use social media as a platform where we can actually have these conversations and point out what might be problematic. So just wanted to add that.
Thanks, Rohini. I'm gonna, Taraki, I think you wanted to sort of add some value, and then I'm just going to go into one last question with Laila, because unfortunately we've run over time, and there's so much to talk about, but let's hear from Taraki first. You're on mute.
Yes, I'll be brief. I also want to chip in something that Hans and Rohini both brought up about the kind of the long term and the short term, and the importance of developing the cultural component of it alongside of the policy, especially in our line of work with sexual and reproductive health. We see that even online or when we have our sessions in person, we always get a group of people who self-select to have that conversation. So we're not reaching the full capacity in all aspects of society. We're just hoping that the work that we do has a ripple effect within particularly the context of sexual and reproductive health, where it's a very private conversation. It's very much within the private sphere and kind of goes in these pockets of among friends or among family members, and then having a very slow ripple effect. So then that tackling that kind of social stigma and taboo, as well as cultural values like the woman's role in the public sphere, which very directly relates to her position as, or rather her identity in the private sphere. So for example, a mother's role in her family dynamic very strongly impacts, as we heard from many stories of when a woman is like criticized in the public sphere as like a woman, but also as a mother and a wife, and like all those factors impact how she presents her identity in the public sphere. So I think tackling both those components alongside each other is very important.
Yeah, and I think Rai wanted 45 seconds from is it from a Voices of Women in Politics angle, or as an activist yourself?
No, I think I'd just like to weigh in from the perspective of women's voice in politics also. And I think Lihini and Harini, since they're both a part of this panel also, I think it's really interesting that as we're talking about social media, there's such a huge problem for women in particular in politics in dealing with misinformation and disinformation, and the kind of pushback that they have also. On social media, it becomes such a huge problem because they are held to, for one thing, just in terms of society, they're held to very unrealistic standards that men aren't, and also there are so many aspects of their personal lives, of their political lives that are kind of brought into the public space through social media in a way in which men certainly don't have to deal with it in the same way. So when we're talking about social media, I think women in the political space definitely have a huge disadvantage, and it's not, it's very difficult for women because they're objectified and sexualized. And I know Lihini and Harini have, personal experiences of having their social media used in, being represented in ways in which were very problematic. And it's true for any woman in the political space. I just wanted to add that as we're talking about social media and the impact social media has on women, and because there's a focus on women in politics. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Rai. And just my last question goes out to Laila. Is there any sort of, how has the Netherlands overcome the challenges like sort of between civil organizations and the state in terms of campaigning with, again, the general public, in changing these mindsets, in speaking to the youth? What challenges do you see forthcoming, or what challenges have you overcome?
Yes, so thank you. Let me just start with the first question. And I think it's a very profound one, because I think it all has to do with being a democratic state based on democratic values. So social movements or civil society, there is a difference between those terms, but I just use them now as a synonym, they are a crucial part in formalizing a democratic and state based on rule of law. And in a healthy society, civil society is perceived as a complementary force to a democratic state. And Pascal also mentioned, if we look at the Netherlands and the history it has on rights, there was a very strong sense of social, political, and financial inequalities. Women became very vocal and started to politically formalize themselves, even though they faced a lot of backlash from conservatives, people, predominantly men, who wanted to impose and preserve the traditional values. Women demanded their rights and used their democratic rights as freedom of expression, free speech, freedom of assembly. And if you look at countries with a strong organized civil society, you also see that there is a very strong democratic state. And they don't see civil society as a threat, but more as a very healthy, dissenting, organized group of organizations. And Pascal also said that, and it's true, that the Netherlands actually has a very unique position in how it works with civil society. Now you have this Power of Voices funding framework, and it's and the previous one was dissenting dissent no
Dialogue and dissent.
Dialogue and dissent, yes, the dialogue and dissent, with a very specific focus for civil society in the Netherlands, but also worldwide, to use their critical voice against the government, but also against the Netherlands. So that is very, very unique, that you fund civil society to be a very critical mass. And I think that as for Women Equals Men, we are part of the civil society and lobby towards the Dutch government, but also towards parliamentarians. We don't always agree, but we feel that we have the environment to use this dissenting voice. And I think that is crucial for civil society to survive, to be very strong, to be very vocal. Unfortunately, worldwide, there is a rise on shrinking civic space. But the backlash that civil society feels and also face, it could also be a sign of something positive. Because the more you challenge power relations, power structures, the more backlash you can expect. And that is actually a sign that you're on the right track. But then you need to have whether it's from the government or from the international community, a system in place that protects the ones that speak out. Because now we really push for women to become very vocal in the public arena. And Tanya also mentioned the article in the Netherlands, where a lot of female politicians finally spoke out about sexism and misogyny. But if you don't have that support, I think it's very difficult and sometimes also irresponsible for us to ask women to be very vocal in a very hostile environment. Because impunity, we all know, whether it's in Afghanistan or in other parts of the world, the more women get very vocal and come really close to the center of power, the more backlash they can face, because the people in charge, they really want to preserve the status quo. They don't want to share power. They want to preserve it. And there's a lot of interest for not changing the way the society is organized. So yes, there is a backlash And but that is also a sign that women are on the right track. And now, as an international community, we need solidarity. We need the Dutch government. We need all civil society to stand side by side with these brave women who are also now here in the Zoom meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Laila. Thank you so much. And we've actually gone half an hour over time, but I hope you will agree with me that this was a valuable conversation. We've just sort of skirted over the issues and there's so much to talk about, but we don't have time. I want to thank all of you once more for being a part of this conversation. And I think as Lihini has sent me a private message as well, you know, to sum up about the fact that it really makes it much bigger and much more impactful when gender defenders come together and speak as a coalition, speak up as a coalition rather than in silos. Yes, each of you has a valuable lot of work that you do, and now the general public is aware that you exist and what areas you work in, but together how much more you can do as a collective and how much more we can push for as civil servants, as activists, as policymakers, as policy influencers, and as just women and men, the general public coming together. And that was the point and the objective of this forum. So I thank you once more for being a part of this. Tanya, would you like to sort of end today's session with any words of wisdom?
Thank you, Shanuki. Yes, no, thank you so much, and to everybody who participated. I'm really grateful to you. I would like to do two things. First, I would like to say sorry, because in my introduction, I was talking about inclusiveness, but I was very exclusive because I was only talking about women. But please, Hans, the men who are our allies are also the most important ones to support this cause. So sorry for that. And then secondly, I have identified 3 areas where we might in the future be able to be of any added value, and I will try to take it up, because as we said, we should not just talk. We should also try to get this progress further. And these areas are indeed the platform, like Women Equals Men. Is there a need for such a gender civil society platform in Sri Lanka? Is there an organization already maybe in that space? And why? Because I also heard that many of you are working together. I'm sure you have your networks and the phone numbers, but I also hear you struggle with the same issues, getting funds, legal assistance. Some of you might get into a new legal area with cyber harassment. Should you organize to exchange your experience in that? So should there be more coordination? And then that's one. Then also, should there be coordination in the government civil society relationship? So that's the second one. And how can we build that bridge? And can we be of help in the future to do that? And then maybe we shouldn't start straight away with the dissenting voice, but also see how government can be helped by the work that, and they know that, I'm sure, the work your organizations do. You reach in areas where they can't reach. You do things where they're still in the political arena taboo to work. But I'm sure that a lot of definitely also civil servants are very happy that you're working in that area. So working on this bridge, can we help there? Let's look into that later at some point. But not today. And then the last one, the multi-party initiatives. If there would be any interest in exchange between the Dutch experiences and the Sri Lankan experience, we're also, of course, happy to look into that. So these are the areas that I identified. There's much more work to do, but I really want to take some of these issues up together with you if there is a need. And thank you so much.
Thank you once more, everybody. And to those of you who are watching this, thank you for joining with us. I hope your eyes have opened. I hope you are enlightened to the fact that we need you, we need each other. So yes, please do reach out to these organizations, engage, see how you can help. Many of them rely on volunteer support, on your patronage, on funding, and of course on support, civil support in getting their messages and their awareness out. As it was said, you know, if we can increase our voice together, we can make such a big change for women in our country. So once again, good night, everyone. Thank you for giving us your time. I know you're all very busy and this is International Women's Week. You all are like Santa Claus at Christmas time. So I'm going to let you go. Thank you and good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.